Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters Ablaze podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home. We're going to start with Miss Jana S Brown, who sometimes cosplays as Jena Rey and other fictional creatures.
Oh, now I'm a fictional creature. I like that. Yeah, and I'm first. That hardly ever happens. Where we go alphabetically, and J is usually so far down the alphabet that I don't get to go first. I wasn't ready. Anyway, I'm Jana S Brown. I do write under the pen name Jena Rey, and that's where all the speculative stuff goes, the weird and the wonderful with smoochies. And I'm excited. Today's going to be a fun discussion.
Outstanding. We're talking about the weird and the smoochies. That's an interesting combination. All right.
Hey, it's a thing, man.
I don't judge. Next, we have Mr. Jesse James Fain, outlaw author extraordinaire.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse James Fain. I do go by the outlaw author because the branding writes itself. I write sword fights, fist fights, gun fights in any genre that you can pretty much imagine because I did all those things for a long time, and I like to bring a little bit of real-life combat into your fictional experience. And dark fantasy is I would say, almost a comfort genre for me. Starting from my love of the originals in like Conan and some of the more fantastical Lovecraft, moving into all of those wonderful 90s films like Legend and Dark Crystal and Last Unicorn, stuff like that.
All right, and I probably will butcher it, and no matter how many times you tell me how to say it, I get it wrong. But we're going to go a try anyway. We've got Miss Magaidh Dunbroch.
Yep.
Was it actually right this time?
Yep, you were.
Woohoo! Mark your calendar.
Like 5 times.
That's true. I mean, you've been on a few times, so
right. So, I'm Magaidh Dunbroch, and I take you into the shadows where gods burn, mortals bleed, and love is as dangerous as the abyss. And I write dark fantasy, grimdark, and romantasy, twisting Greek mythology because it wasn't already twisted enough.
Okay. How many times did you perfect that elevator speech? Because that was like perfect.
I just read it off my Instagram, so it's there for everyone to see.
Nice. See, one day I'll be smart enough to actually write all this stuff down and read it so that I have a really great
I have
tagline
like a running like note on my phone that I can just pull up that has like a book pitch that like my alpha reader has done for me, and then like we went through and did all my branding so that I had it right there, because if it's left up to me it'll just be really awkward and confusing.
Awkward and confusing was my first band name. All right. So we already have told you dozens of times how we found these fine, crazy folks. Basically, we were in the same padded cell together, and we made a break from the asylum, and we became friends. And when we're not riding around in a van solving mysteries as mercenaries, we do things and like write books and stuff. So, and if you're old enough to get that reference, maybe answer that AARP email.
Hey, shut up, young man.
I mean, at least I didn't break out into YMCA song with that one, young man.
Yeah.
That's
a place we could go.
Yeah, no, that we don't want to go there. There's enough nastiness in the world. You don't need me singing. But I was taking the kid to church, and I had one of the kid is maybe 10. And he's like, Dad says I'm supposed to let the old people in first. Why don't you go, sir? And I'm like, you know what? Is it acceptable to kick someone else's kids? Because now I want to.
That's funny.
So,
but he was being polite, man.
Now I need bail money. I'm just saying.
I saw a TikTok today that was a girl filming her husband, and it says, "Your husband's older than you," and then she's like, "Heaven forbid a girl takes care of the elderly."
One of the guys in my army group, we meet. It started as a PTSD group, and then they closed the group, and we just still hang out and like do brunch every so often. His wife is a teacher, and they're trying to teach him the concept of, sometimes with articles in science, like they age out. Like, so you could find the perfect article that supports the point you wanted to prove, but if it's not current, it doesn't matter because, it's in school, we all want to cheat and figure out what we think we want to say, and then we find the evidence to support that rather than really look at it objectively. She's teaching that lesson, and so the kid comes back the next day and asks if it's okay to use this article from the late 1900s. It was 1999. That was too old. My knees hurt just hearing that.
Yeah.
So
sad, so sad.
Another kid that probably needs to be yeeted off the planet for a while.
Yeah.
I noticed
one day they too will be old.
Yeah, I'm getting more violent in my old age, I guess. Now get off my lawn. All right, so the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, we do have the religion questions, and we mixed it up to be topical today. Are you guys ready for this?
Oh, yeah.
Close enough.
Right. Gretel and Hansel, the Brothers Grimm, or the Dark Crystal? Mags, you're going to go first today.
Dark Crystal every time.
Okay. Any reason?
I remember watching it as a kid and just like all of the colors and the creepiness just called to me, and like I thought the Skeksis were so cool. And that purple crystal, like purple is my favorite color, probably because of that show. And like
Nice.
there's hasn't been anything like it and like ever in my opinion, other than the labyrinth that was created, but it was Jim Henson too. So, you know, pretty much anything by him is gold.
Okay. Jana?
I'm with Maggie. It's got to be the Dark Crystal. I mean, that is formative material from my youth. And as children, my siblings and I used to actually play the Dark Crystal.
Oh, that's
and so, you know, it was so much fun. And the funny thing was that it was my younger siblings all arguing over who got to be Fizzgig, the dog fuzzy thing.
Yeah.
Because it was a perfect excuse to wander around the house going, ah! And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. But yeah, loved it. My one sister was absolutely traumatized because the Skeksis were scary. I thought they were awesome. So yeah, it's Jim Henson all the way.
Okay, Jesse?
3 for 3 Dark Crystal. That's one of those movies. Formative material is the best way to describe it. It's one of those movies that I watched as a kid. And Jana properly corrected me in the side chat. It is in fact an 80s movie, but I grew up in the 90s, and that's when I watched it.
It's all right. We'll allow you in the club, kid.
But all of that being said, I did think Brothers Grimm was really good, and enjoyed that one a lot too. But Dark Crystal all the way.
For me, I liked Dark Crystal. I liked Gretel and Hansel. I also liked the inverted version, the other movie, Hansel and Gretel, where the siblings were out like hunting monsters. But I liked the Brothers Grimm. I have a very German grandmother that used to like give us all the scary stories because it was supposed to teach you cautionary tales. Yeah. She hated Disney with a passion because they ruined her people's stories.
That's true.
Because fairy tales were supposed to warn you to behave. Mm-hmm. And so if you didn't have somebody getting their head ripped off or, you know, tormented till eternity, like, is it really a Grimm's fairy tale? No, it's not.
Baba Yaga.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm going to go with the Brothers Grimm. But Dark Crystal was good. And as a child of the 80s, I too have sentimental memories of it. But even more sentimental was the time where my grandmother would give me lectures, and her German accent always got thicker when she talked about it.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's lovely.
So, and it's always the short one. She was like 5 foot barely, maybe 4'11". It's always the short ones. And she didn't reach up to slap you when you messed up. She kicked you in the ankles. I thought about like wearing shin pads once, and my mother gave me the look. And she's like, you will endure. Like, yes, ma'am. So I never wore the shin pads. I thought about it, though, a lot. Just saying. All right, and because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Legend, Van Helsing, or Solomon Kane? Jana.
Now, see, this one's a little harder for me because Legend is another one of those formative things. That's another 80s, 1985 kind of thing. But Hugh Jackman and Van Helsing was so much fun. The almost steampunk that they brought to it put kind of a different twist on there. So that's a toss up for me. I like them both, but for different reasons. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go with that.
Maggie?
I don't know that one. I think I love Legend. It was the first thing I saw Tom Cruise in. But I absolutely love. Wait, what were the options?
Legend, Van Helsing, or Solomon Kane?
Van Helsing. That's what I was going for. Sorry, TBI moment. I remember. I loved how they did like the vampires in it, and like that like little kind of spicy scene with when she died at the end with Hugh Jackman, and I was just like, oh, you know what? I'm hooked. I love Van Helsing. I loved all of the like. It was very fantasy, but you had like futuristic like weapons with like the grenades and the like the arrow slingers, and I'm just like, ooh, that's what I like.
Okay, Jesse?
I think Legend's definitely the classic, but I'm actually going to give Solomon Kane some love because that was a pretty solid adaptation of who Solomon Kane is as a character. Another great Robert E. Howard character, just a man and rock solid in his beliefs, fighting evil, hunting down anything, heretics, witches, whatever, vampires, werewolves. It didn't matter what showed up. Solomon Kane faced it. And I will say that that's another, like, if there's, you've said before that all three is an option. That's an all three lineup for me. The coolest thing about Van Helsing was the way that they made everything look, the way that Dracula looked, the way that when Van Helsing turns into the werewolf, the way Frankenstein looked. There's CGI in that movie that looks better than the majority of CGI today. And I don't know what happened that we lost the ability to make things look that good. Same thing with like Reign of Fire when we talk about dragons. The dragons in Reign of Fire look better than the majority of any dragon movie that's been made recently. But anyway, so yeah, I give props to all three there. That's a great list.
If we're going for nostalgia, it's a Legend. I have memories watching that as a kid. If we're going for just the action that I enjoyed, it's Van Helsing all the way. I've seen Solomon Kane, but I don't know that I was sober when I watched it, so I'd probably have to watch it again to get a fair judgment. It was one of those ones. It's one of those ones that got played in the barracks, a lot for barracks parties, just because it's got the ambiance, right, that the dudes like. So, like I said, when enough beer's involved, I just don't trust my judgment anymore. but Van Helsing definitely winner and Legend for nostalgia. All right. So the next one is going to be the hardest one. So are you guys ready for this final one?
All right, we're ready. Throw it at us.
What's the scariest fantasy creature that you'd never want to encounter? Do you want me to go first while you guys think about it?
Yeah.
So the Lamashti, which is a mother of demons, it's from a demon goddess from Mesopotamian culture. And she's like a hybrid creature, like really thick hair, 2 skulls over her breasts. Super scary, 3-eyed taloned bird snake creature. I'm just saying you wouldn't want to enter her in a dark alley. Or encounter her, not enter her. Ooh, different story.
I don't think that would be very fun either, JR.
No, I don't think that would be fun either, but we're not that kind of podcast.
You said it wasn't that kind of show, JR.
All right, so Maggie, save me from myself.
I'm just going to make it worse. I would have to say like a ghoul and everything. Like, I'm absolutely terrified of zombies in general, especially after watching The Walking Dead. But like ghouls, I remember my fear of it came from my favorite like book ever. It's called the Starlight and Shadow series by Elaine Cunningham, which is part of the Wizards of the Coast and Forgotten Realms. And like there's a scene in the third book of it where she like drops down in a tunnel and there's a ghoul sniffing around for her, and like I just remember like getting so scared reading that, and then every time I encounter them in like Dungeons and Dragons and I'm just like, oh, I'm so creeped out. So yeah, it would be that one.
All right, Jana.
All right, so I like the old school Fae back when they were scary versus sexy. I mean, well, it's true. There was still some sexy in it, but you look at the original legends, and there's reasons why you didn't want to draw their attention. You wanted to be very careful about that whole thing, and if you were going to make a deal, you were really, really careful about what you were doing.
Yeah.
But in particular, I'm really fond of the red caps because they are just so creepy, and I would not want to meet that in a dark alley when it's like, they have iron in their shoes, which is actually a thing that's an antithesis to them, and they get off on the fact that it hurts so much, and then they're going to stomp you with it, eat you, and put their caps in your blood. I mean, just all the creepy and scary, and if they can get their mouth around it, they can eat it. It doesn't matter what it is. So what do you put between you and them when they swallow bullets? It's just, yeah, no. Nope. So the red caps are a good law.
Jesse?
My uncanny valley / other response is extreme violence. And so there's a lot of things that would like scare other people that just make me really aggressive, right? Like, so it's like, oh no, a zombie. Okay, well, I take his head off. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't bother me. Like, I carry a knife. What'll be all right. But for me, it's the things that you can't hurt. Like, no matter what you do, or there's this very specific thing that you have to do that you don't know. So run into something like a Wendigo out in the middle of the woods. Like, you got your big bad rifle, you're a woodsman, you've been out there your whole life, you know what to do, and you start blowing holes in this thing and it doesn't care. It just laughs. And that's where things get scary for me. So you could file 100 different monsters into that category, but that's when it's like, when I can't kill it without digging up dragon glass or some nonsense like that, that's when the problems start.
Okay.
That's a good answer.
That's a good answer. And finally, because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it? Jana, you're going to shock me today. I know you're going to give me something different.
No, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to hold my Dr. Pepper mug, and it's lovely even if tonight it's caffeine-free Dr. Pepper. But yes, I love my Dr. Pepper. I drink it as much as my doctor will allow me. And having gone to the doctor recently, she said that she should allow me a little bit less than what I do. But la. I don't have many vices. I'm keeping this one.
This reminds me every time I go, like my parents like to go to Cracker Barrel. That's one of their favorite restaurants. And even if you don't get anything, just the ambiance is kind of cool, the old general store. But they have, while they're there, it's like this 12-pound chocolate bar that's like huge. And I can just picture the guy eating that. I'm like, my doctor said I can only have one candy bar a day. Right? And they're eating the whole damn thing in one setting. I'm picturing you with like this huge giant Dr. Pepper bucket.
One, but it's big.
One.
Right, I just had one, Doc. I don't know what the problem is.
Well, Alton Brown did a thing at one point where he was talking about weight loss and how he ended up losing a lot of weight. And he says, two of the keys there is that I have one can of sardines and one drink a week, but the can of sardines is really little and the drink's really big. So he was trying to balance all that out, and it's like, yeah, I kind of get that, where it's like, yeah, I can only have one, but it's going to be a good one.
That's funny.
I don't know that I've ever had sardines.
You're not missing anything.
I mean,
they're fine.
Be grateful.
Put bones in them and you just crunch through them.
I've had other weird stuff, like haggis. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, haggis is an odd textural thing.
And all 12 of our
weird
listeners
foods.
from Scotland.
We really do have to do a cast on weird foods, but
you should, yeah.
Because that sometimes can come into good book plot points.
Yes. It shows up frequently.
All right, we're making a note. Weird food. And while I write that note, Maggie, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
I prefer coffee over tea. Because you can't get like the kind of tea that I like everywhere, and it's just disappointing. So usually coffee you can doctor and make better. But I really like mine with lots of cream and lots of sugar. So I like more everything else but coffee.
Okay. Did you develop that while you were in the Army, or is this something you've just always been this way?
I actually developed drinking more coffee like after I got married, because that's all my grizzly old Army husband drinks is coffee. And so yeah, we'll go through like 3 or 4 pots of it a day on the weekends and just keep drinking it. But it's like not the same coffee. Like it's really fancy coffee. Like Bones Coffee Company is one of my favorites, and because they have flavored stuff that's like really tasty, like Highland Grog, or like they have a pink unicorn one that's really good. I can't remember the name of it. But then like Black Rifle Coffee also has like really stout manly stuff for like when you have to do manly things. So that's good too.
I've tried Black Rifle, wasn't really a fan. Bones is good, and they sell every year. They sell a cup that's shaped like a skull, so you can drink coffee from the skull of your enemies.
Exactly.
Nice.
And they're really
As is
nice
tradition.
quality cups.
Yeah, they're stoneware, and it's nicely made. But if you do drink from the skulls of your enemies, literally, that makes you green, right? Because those are green, recyclable.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Biodegradable.
Right? So you're doing the environment a favor.
So it depends on how you manage to plug the eye sockets and the nasal cavity, because you gotta make sure the skull doesn't leak. But as long as you did that properly with like some kind of proper bio-friendly material, yeah, you should be fine.
He's thought about this a lot, Jana.
Right?
Should we be
I can't
concerned?
blame him.
I mean, as one does. All right.
Exactly.
So now that we got that out of the way, we're going to jump into the panel of Dark Fantasy. And since we did this panel to time to the release of Maggie's latest book, I am going to throw her cover onto the screen. And could you give us the ad copy? Because you're sponsoring this episode.
Oh, yay. Yeah, give me just a second. Okay. So my fancy tagline is a god in pursuit of ultimate power, a throne built on treachery. As Dalios tightens his grip, the shadows stir, his allies waver, and the divine balance teeters on ruin. Will his ambition carve a new era, or will his empire burn to ash? And then the blurb is with the ambrosia firmly in his grasp and the title of Lord God claimed, Dalios turns his sights beyond Saloon to the enigmatic Lord and Lady Death. For centuries, his intricate schemes and ruthless ambitions have reshaped the Faderoth, crushing his enemies and tightening his grip on power. But the weight of his divine aspiration begins to strain even as the foundations of his stolen throne. His reliance on the daemoni, once his greatest weapon, becomes a desperate crutch as the loyalty of the Thrundle waver and the shadows he commands threaten to turn against him. So it's the third book in the series, and it's a play on the traditional Greek myth of the moon goddess and her mortal lover.
Oh, nice.
And it also bridges the gap to my other series called Shadow and Brimstone, which he's the bad guy in.
Okay.
Oh.
That's interesting. So wait, it's the third in the series. I'm assuming has to be read in order because you're using terminology that it sounds like I would learn about in the first 2 books, right?
Correct. Yes. So it builds.
Start at 1, love them all.
Yeah. So you start at Tears of Silver Shadows is the first book. where you meet Saloon and everything kind of builds up, and you only meet Dahlia twice in it, but you're like, I'm not quite sure about this guy. Then in the second book, which is Tears of Stolen Radiance, you meet him more and you're like, oh, this guy is like no joke, but what does he really want? And why is he doing this? And then in the third book, you find out what his end goal is and why he's playing the end goal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued.
It has really fun, well, I think it's really fun because it's dark fantasy. There's obsession and stalking, ancient magic betrayals, and yeah, those are the tropes.
I'm just saying, you call it stalking. I prefer to call it persistence.
Persistence, yes. I like that one too.
So where did you come up with the idea for the series? And we have talked about it before, so you can go back to that. I think it was episode like 259, something like that.
Yeah, I think we did Tears of Stolen Radiance when it came out. Or I mean, Tears of Silver Shadows when it came out.
But where did you come up with the idea for this one? And then we'll dive into the broader dark fantasy genre.
So the first book, I actually wrote my books all out of order because I like to confuse and irritate my readers. So I wrote Shadow and Brimstone first, and it's a Hades and Persephone retelling. And then writing it, I was like, oh, like this has a backstory that needs fleshing out. And so I wrote Tears of Silver Shadows, and I always loved the moon, like the goddess that's mine, that I pray to and everything. She's of the moon. And so I'm like, I need to give her her own like little backstory. So it's kind of like an homage to my goddess. But then like Saloon from Greek mythology doesn't have like a whole lot of stories to her. Pretty much she pulls the moon with her chariot at night, and she pisses off the Zeus, and he curses her lover to sleep forever. And it's like the only thing she's wanted her whole life is this mortal man, and she doesn't even get to have him because Zeus curses him. And so I kind of like do the same thing in my books, but it since it's romantasy, like there's always a happy ending to it. But like, so I was like, I have to write this, and it worked out well going through each book and like having her like she creates vampires and werewolves on the Faderoth that I created, and like there's lots of cool Greek god myths throughout it. And then like found family, there's like some snarky banter between side characters who are eventually going to have their own book, and some like tension, spicy tension between them. And then so I just really liked that this lore from Greek mythology and that it didn't have a lot to go on, so I could really like play off of that and created exactly what I wanted for my world.
Okay. All right. With that, you mentioned it was dark fantasy, which is why we scheduled the panel the way we did, since it was timed to your release. So for everyone here, what is dark fantasy? And obviously it's a free-for-all from here on out. You don't have to wait to be called on.
So for me personally, dark fantasy is like, obviously you have the fantasy genre, but like more darker themes, like real world themes that people don't really touch on in fantasy, like death, destruction. Like I go into almost like I border on grim dark, so you see lots of like blood and gore, like on page violence. Excuse me. Like demon descriptions, like really spicy darkness, like kinks and stuff like that. I consider that part of dark fantasy.
Okay.
And it's another one of those odd ones where we start splitting hairs, because I was thinking about, we've got grimdark versus dark fantasy, and you can say, well, it's because in a lot of dark fantasy, there's still hope. There's still, because we think about some of the ones we were talking about Legend, about Van Helsing, about that kind of stuff. And while they don't necessarily get a tied together happily ever after, you still do get to a point where there's a resolution, the evil is pushed back, the faith is rewarded, things happen, and you still have that glimmer of hope that comes through. In a lot of grimdark, there isn't. Period. It's things are going to be bad. They're going to get worse, and nobody is innocent, and everybody's kind of terrible. And so it's watching to see how that all falls apart. And I feel like in dark fantasy, we still pull some of those more traditional fantasy themes about what it is they're fighting for, why it matters, and that you can pull those little strings of hope through, that there are still unicorns in the world, that you can fix a broken crystal, that you can have these things happen, even when what's surrounding it is a lot darker than we get in a lot of our more white hat, shiny fantasy.
Yeah.
That was so beautiful.
Well, and I think a functional way, the short version of that is that the dark fantasy is fantasy that's not afraid of including horror.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the big defining detail, is that the original fantasy and epic fantasy, Tolkien has like fighting tension, but there's never really any, at least in my opinion, scenes in the more epic fantasies that make you want, like, that have that horror feel, that build dread, that build use gore or violence in that aspect. And that's what dark fantasy does, is it takes you into these dark, nasty, evil places, and makes you face these dark, nasty, evil villains that make a very scary, everyman kind of experience. You have to go into the dark alley in dark fantasy instead of grabbing all your buddies and the floodlights and charging in to the dark alley with a more traditional fantasy.
That's a really good
Well,
one.
and when you do have those scenes in epic fantasy, they're balanced in a different way, because I think a lot of what happens in Mordor that's dark fantasy, man. There's some scary stuff there, but it's also balanced out by the beauty of the elves, by the other things that are part of those epic themes. So it doesn't stay in that dark place nearly as long. And with dark fantasy, we spend most of it in that dark place, and the hope is that there are points of humor, there are parts of hope and lightness that are there, but I wouldn't say that they necessarily balance it out in the same way. And your happily ever afters are not guaranteed. We very often lose somebody major by the end of a dark fantasy, or we have heroes who live long enough to become villains. We have a lot of those themes that are also engaged with, where you don't necessarily have plot armor, and even if you win in the end, you don't always come out unchanged.
Yeah.
Like
So
that.
would you guys make a distinction between dark fantasy, dark romance, and grimdark then? Because they all have that underlying darkness as one of the central tenets.
They're kissing cousins.
Well, and it's a focus thing at that point. Like it's not the pieces. It's like what makes a pepperoni pizza versus meat lovers pizza. Well, the meat lovers pizza has pepperoni, but it wasn't just pepperoni. Like that's kind of where we're getting at this point. Like it's
hair splitting. Now we're to hair splitting, but I think we've covered the basics of it. It's that it does go into those darker places, and you have to stay there and deal with them, and you don't always come out. It's like I was thinking about in gaming, we do Call of Cthulhu. And Call of Cthulhu, the whole point of a lot of those books and stories in the game is that you go insane, you take ludicrous amounts of damage, the world gets eaten several times, and it's that kind of background and genre for it.
Yeah, I would argue that's grimdark. That specific example is grimdark, but
yeah.
Maggie, you were going to say something?
I was gonna say before you use that reference, I was gonna say Baldur's Gate. I don't know if anyone plays Baldur's Gate, but that's what we've been playing lately, and I'm just like, yeah, everything in that is Baldur's Gate.
I don't think I've played that one in a while. So do you think dark fantasy is more popular in the written form, in the TV screen, or in video games or gaming in general? Like, do you think it's got one medium where it's either best represented or more likely to see it?
From what I see, like from around me, is definitely movies and video games are more popular with the genre and everything. We've been watching a lot of like anime lately, and like what just came out is Devil May Cry. And everyone, like, I'm in a chat group and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool and everything. And I'm like, well, have you like read the comics or anything for it? And they're like, oh no, those are way too dark and everything. And I'm like, but we're watching the show and everything. Or I mean, I said comics, but I meant video game. And a lot of people are like, no, that I can't play that, it's too dark, but they can watch it like on screen and it's totally fine in like movie standpoint. But I don't get a whole lot of people like around me that will read dark fantasy because they prefer like the happily ever afters and like something more spice driven.
Okay.
You see it in everything. Go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, I was gonna say I run into where that just cycles. Like it's a constant evolution. So, I consider Game of Thrones to be dark fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Game of Thrones was popular as a novel series, then I would have told you like more people read dark fantasy. But then the TV show came out, and then it was like, okay, cool, now everybody's obsessed with the TV show. Then the TV show ended horribly, and everybody realized Martin's never going to finish a book ever. And now, everybody kind of hates it. But there's other great series. There was The Prince of Thorns from Mark Lawrence. That was a great dark fantasy that ended up being dark sci-fi in the end. That was a cool twist. The First Law series, Joe Abercrombie's awesome. Like, there's plenty of these great novels. But I don't think that's... Yeah, Malzahn. I don't think any of those are... I don't think there's a dark fantasy in the current lexicon of reading that's huge right now. It's just not the big thing right now. Everybody's stuck on romantasy right now. And so it'll cycle back through, and right now you see it more in visual media because just how everything's in the rotation.
Mm-hmm. And you see it in role-playing and tabletop, again, based on what it is that people want. Because Wizards of the Coast and World of Darkness was huge for a long time there in the 90s. I played a lot of it. I still love their setup. I've written stories based on some of the ideas that they presented in the games that then I took and ran with and took them into different directions. So there's that. There's Call of Cthulhu. There's a lot of different properties that have gone down that. And you can even get things like in Dungeons and Dragons, there's the whole Ravenloft series, and that's dark fantasy D&D. And you'll see that come up in modules sometimes where you can go with classic D&D, or you can take your classic D&D characters and go have this little dark fantasy horror romp where you deal with Strahd, or where you deal with some of those various things that come up and that are more dark fantasy focused.
It would help if I unmute. Do you think there's some tropes that lend itself better to dark fantasy?
Vampires. Yeah, there's several monsters or tropes that absolutely belong more in a dark fantasy environment than they do, because they need that horror treatment. They need to have that like spooky, scary. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can pull one out as like a one-off, one encounter villain in a different kind of fantasy, but if you're going to focus on something like that, do an Empire of the Vampire or something like that. Like, you have to take that into a darker place. And I think that that's much more. If your focus is going to be the dark thing, then put it in the dark place. Put it in the dark fantasy, basically.
Okay. Jana, you got anything to add?
I think again with the tropes, we're just looking at, staying in the so there's the idea that with urban fantasy, they run towards the bad scary thing and they intend to defeat it. With paranormal romance, they run towards the bad scary thing and they intend to seduce it. And with dark fantasy, they run towards the dark scary thing and will probably get eaten. And those are the kind of the breakdown that I've seen as far as the tropes, because you see a lot of those tropes shared across things. I mean, you're talking about vampires, but I can give you a lot of examples in paranormal romance where it's not dark necessarily in that way. It can be, but it isn't always. Or in urban fantasy, there's places where the vampires are the good guys. And they're not dark and scary at all. So it depends on the treatment of it, but it's still dealing with those tropes of you're going to walk into the darkness. How do you deal with what's on the other side? And what kind of main characters are going to deal in that way? Because a Jim Butcher, Harry Dresden, he's an urban fantasy guy. And he's going to go in wand at the ready and deal with it. Even things that are a very dark and scary kind of thing, that's not the way that he looks at it, and that would be very different if we had a different kind of main character in the same situations.
Okay. Are there any thematic things that you think are maybe not required, but you see a lot in dark fantasy? I would imagine things like revenge kind of tales would work a lot. But are there anything else that you guys are thinking of, since you guys are our subject matter experts for this evening, at least?
Revenge, we see a lot of morally gray. I mean, it's like what you were talking about with your hero becoming villainous at the end and then crossing over to another thing. You get a lot of that, the themes about what does power do, corruption, all of that kind of stuff. Those themes show up really frequently in dark fantasy as the, will you fight the dark thing, or are you going to become the dark thing? Do you give into those things? Do you lose your faith? Do you, what are those things that go in there? And it's even the question, go back to Legend, and the question there is, will Lily lose her innocence? Because that's why she could bring in the unicorn. That's why it was so important. And that's why darkness had to corrupt her in order to bring in the unicorn, in order to get what he wanted. And that was the question there, is, did she really lose her innocence? Is that really the way things were going? Because Tom Cruise shows up and he's all heroic and all this, that, and the other. But the question at the heart of that is darkness versus innocence. And we see a lot of those kinds of themes, those things versus, and will one fall to the other?
Okay. Jesse, got anything to add to that one?
I think dark fantasy isn't obligated in the same way to deliver unto you hope. I think that the hope can be there, the hope can win out at the end, but it's the difference between Daredevil and the Punisher. It's the difference between Batman and Red Hood. There's not a obligation there to produce survivors. And if your heroes can be much grittier, they can be heroes and villains in one. You can do the whole everybody's a jerk. I mentioned Prince of Thorns earlier, and the main character, the actual Prince of Thorns, is not a dude that's easy to root for. He's a terrible person. The whole. I mean, from the rip. I've had more than one person, when I recommended the series, look at me and say, "Hey, man, I couldn't finish that. I hate this guy." And I understand it. So I think that's another big kind of trope or distinction, is that we're not looking at our moral statements are no longer in the same equivalence. We don't have to give you the best and brightest at some point to outshine the dark. We can have fight fire with fire, kind of deals here, where one monster takes on another.
Mhm.
I agree.
Though sometimes the hope does show up, and sometimes good does conquer evil. So it's got a nice range to it, because the Dark Crystal ends in a beautiful place, but
Yeah.
boy, did they go through a lot to get there. And sometimes that's the point too, is that they went into the dark place, and sometimes they do make it out, and the hope is fulfilled, and sometimes it isn't. There isn't a guarantee, so that's part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. I
Pyrrhic
personally like
victory.
the dark fantasy books that like you read it and you think that there's going to be a little bit of hope there, and then they actually like wreck you in the end, and you just like sit there like not being able to function for days and days on end, just like thinking about the ending, like, and you're like, I wish it would have a happy ending, or that, but it doesn't.
It does in my brain canon, because I'm that person. But
Yeah.
I get it. There are lots of readers who come to it for different readers, and some want to be wrecked at the end, and I'm the one that'll go, well, they ruined it. In my head, this went differently, and I will stick to that. Thank you very much.
I'm here for it.
Okay. Do you see a lot of subverting expectations in dark fantasy, or they play pretty strict to the tropes?
I see, like, because I have to market my books a little bit differently because I cross over into having like romance subplots. So when people pick up my books, they're like, this isn't a happy ending. And I'm like, well, I'm not a romance author. Like, there's a romance subplot. So I put it in there, but my like who it is first and foremost, like, I'm a dark fantasy grimdark author. So you may or may not get it. You might get some romance throughout it, but I think that's where readers understanding what genres they like and understanding the actual genre itself and the expectations within certain genres comes into hand, because a lot of readers do not understand genre-based writing. Like, they kind of read a multitude of things, and when they pick up something like that, all they see is what they want to see. They see, oh, well, there's some romance in this, so it's got to have a happily ever after.
Mhm.
Or this book is all romance because there's a romance subplot in it, instead of paying attention to the grimdark or the dark fantasy. And that's what is going to be the majority of it in a lot of books.
You'd think they'd get that from the cover, because your cover does not in any way scream romantasy, romance, or anything else. It screams dark fantasy. Probably, we expect romance subplots in a lot of things because relationships are just a very important part of being people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny how readers will grab onto, well, but this is what I was expecting. It's like, what in any of my marketing materials made you think that this was what that was going to be?
Yeah.
People are funny.
When I first started out too, I was like, oh, well, being a new author, I'm like, I want them to know that it has romance in it and everything, but it's like very soft romance in this series. So like there's no like on-page sexual scenes or innuendos of any kind. It's just very like sweet romance, and then something happens and then life goes on. But like there's a lot of grief and like heavy emotions. But I had to completely rebrand it and be like, there are romance subplots to this. It is not a romance novel. And so like when I market it now, I have to say, because I have some character art, because the readers are like, well, we want to see what they look like together. So the main characters, I have like a sweet little character art for them, with the understanding that it's not a happy ending.
Okay. How is that received by your readers? The lack of a happy ending.
Well, since they don't know a lot of that until get to like Shadow and Brimstone, if they've been there, some of them are really happy. They really like what they get throughout my books. But I have a lot of like Google reviews that are like, there was no romance in this. I read it for the romance and it was really slow, and I was expecting like more romance, and I'm like, I'm not a romance author for this series. Like, this series is not about romance. So kind
so
of half.
you write it. So Jesse and Jana, do you actually also write dark fantasy, or are you just fans of the genre?
I have some that is written but not yet published. So I have definitely dabbled. I don't have followers for that yet because I'm trying to decide where it belongs in my catalog.
Fair.
For me, it depends on your definition of dark fantasy. I think Rune is arguably dark fantasy. He's a skinwalker that fights nasty evil creatures, and the humans around him are probably normally the worst part of it. Like, he's taken on dragons and stuff like that, but the crew he has to deal with as a pirate captain, they're the real monsters. And there's plenty of like people that don't get saved. Like, there's plenty of things like that. So like, I'm using fantasy elements, but technically it's set in the post Civil War era, and it's got a lot of steampunk to it. It's got steam tech. So is it steampunk, or is it dark fantasy, or is it dark steampunk? I don't know, but I do write with those elements for sure. And I really enjoy, as a reader too. I read a bunch of series that are like that. So it's kind of both.
Semantics.
Okay. When you said you got to figure out where it sets in the catalog, are you talking because you have like a dozen pen names?
Me?
Not a dozen yet.
Oh, sorry.
but Megan, right?
Meg.
See, this is my brain is old and all names start sounding the same. But when you do have multiple pen names, that's one of the things is you have to go, does this fulfill the promises of that pen name, or close enough that it goes there, or does it go under another pen name? Because pen names for me is all about audience expectation. And I want them to get what they expect. It's why I created pen names, was because initially I had everything under one name. And then I had people who started complaining because they're like, because we're looking for the romances. We want our nice contemporary romances, small town smoochies and all that kind of stuff. And why do we have to dig through all this fantasy crap in order to get to it? And I had fantasy readers that, had the opposite problem of, what's with all of these funny, sweet covers? Where's more of the, we want to kill things and the magic and all of that kind of stuff. And then my nonfiction had no place there either. And I'm trying to send clients to my nonfiction. So that's why I started breaking up pen names. And I don't believe there's a certain line of thought that says that for every subgenre you write in, you should have a different pen name. And I think that is a path to absolute insanity, because managing more than 3 or 4 of them is enough of a challenge, much less with a bunch of extras. So, but it is going based on content and based on audience expectation. Is the umbrella under this name wide enough that all of this belongs there? Or am I going to surprise people with the content or with those other things that's going to turn them off and that can be bad to my entire catalog? So that's always what I go through when I decide, okay, I have a piece. Where's it going to go? Does it go under one of these pen names? Does it sit aside for a while? Would it be the creation of a new pen name? And I think every author kind of has to decide how that works, because we do want people to see our pen name and go, yes, that is a writer who writes the stuff like what I want to read. I don't want to surprise them with things that they don't want, because they get upset and then they ditch your entire catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, obviously, this is a broad topic, and we've kind of been all over the place. So if you've got specific questions, dear listener, you want us to dive into, absolutely shoot us a message. We'll get future panels on. But with that, I've got two closing questions. First, do you think there are certain things that you look for on a cover that tell you it's dark fantasy?
I like to see like dark fantasy to me means like darker colors, verbiage that isn't like, like happy fairy tale kind of bullshit on there. Something that is to the point and like maybe on darker elements, like maybe like swords and skulls and bats or blood, something that's not a meadow and like hugging people, maybe.
Okay. What about you, Jesse?
It's an aesthetic. Like you're gonna look for dark themes, right? Like you expect a cover is going to match the theme of whatever is on the inside. Like, and people judge books by covers, no matter how much the old saying says not to.
Yeah.
So if I'm seeing blood and skulls and blades and that's not offset by a couple kissing on the front cover, that's kind of the expectation that I'm going for. I'm expecting for a dark aesthetic. Dark is the key word here. Like we call it dark for a reason. So I mean that's just me. I'm not a cover designer. I'm not a pro artist in that way. I write because I can't draw. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay. Yeah, for me, like that's hard because a lot of the dark fantasy type covers, because they're so dark, they're hard to see when you're colorblind.
Or old.
Yeah, and then when you're looking at the thumbnails too, it doesn't. So I generally, if I'm going to look at something that's dark, I've got to go on the full screen, like do my old man magnify the hell out of it thing. So I'm not always the best. Like there's a reason I farm out all of my covers. You know what I mean? Like even just deciding what looks good. Okay, so would you guys want to live in a dark fantasy setting?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
So, like, I have violent tendencies and I'm like overly aggressive. So I think that I would fit a dark fantasy novel. Like, I've done martial arts my whole life and I'm skilled with like several sets of weapons, like including all guns. So I think that I would handle myself pretty well and it would be easier for me to deal with that because I contemplate punching people in the face on a daily basis and wonder how I could get away with it, to make them shut up or leave me alone, or when they just do like complete like nonsensical bullshit. And I think that I would fare better in a world with like rules like what I write in my books.
Okay. Jana?
No, I'm too old for this crap. Because we look at it and it's like, yes, I have the background with combat and this, that, and the other, but now I am lots older than I was at that time, and I'm lots more broken than I was at that time, and I would be the one that everybody else would outrun and the bear would eat me because I've got bad hips. So if you want to survive a dark fantasy, take me with you because I'm going to end up being the sacrificial meat shield whether I want to be or not. So good luck to me there. Yeah, the current me does not have the physical oomph to be able to keep up with the monsters, so I will step back and snipe them from far.
I will say a tentative yes if I have enough plot armor and my body when I was in my 20s.
There you go. Yeah, if we change the rules, then.
But otherwise, the answer is not only no, but hell no. What about you, Jesse?
Yeah, I get to give, I just hit 35. I feel like I just became entitled to give the old man answer. I'm too soft now. There was a time in my 20s when I was still moving, I was still moving half a ton any direction I wanted to when I was still active and really heavy in martial arts. I'd have written in a bunch of different universes if I, was given the option. Now I have a family, I got responsibilities, I carry a gun for a reason, and now it would be, those first two, dark evil things that stepped up got put through the blender, but now I'm freaking gassed, man. I'm tired and grumpy, and just hand me that grenade and y'all get out of here. And that's I'll skip that if I got the option. So yeah, just like you said, Jr. Younger me, sure. Uh, Older me, no, I'm good, thanks.
All right. So as we bring this puppy to a close, Max, what are you writing now, and then how can listeners and viewers find you? And keep in mind, this episode will be airing at the end of May to time to your release. So, we're asking future you.
So I'm actually writing the origin story to Shadow and Brimstone. So there's two characters um, that are in the tier series that's releasing that my whole world is geared towards, which is Lord and Lady Death. And it's their origin story about how they come to power and why the Secrets of the Thrundle series happen. So I'm writing that series right now, and I'm also writing another spin-off standalone that happens like in between this series coming out on the 30th of May and the Shadow and Brimstone series that's coming out. So it's one huge interconnected world.
And how can they track you on the internet?
Oh, sorry. So my social media handles are author.mdunbroch, and it has all of my link trees, all of the information for my website and books. And on Amazon, my author profile is Magaidh Dunbroch.
Okay. Jana, what are your mini personalities working on, and how can we stalk you on the internet?
You can find me and my many personalities over at opalkingdompress.com. I do have a couple. Let's see. If we're in May, I will have an open call asking for stories about griffins. So if anybody wants to write me griffin stories, you can pop on over there and send them to me. I want to read them all. As far as what my personalities will be working on, well, one of them by that point should be releasing a very, very sweet romance about a billionaire and a baker, which is a very, very cute little thing. But since you're more interested in the not cute little things, you and I are working on The Doorway to the Divine, which is our military fantasy lit RPG. And we are having a crap ton of fun. There's a lot of stuff that's being blown up and a lot of just other shenanigans. They're shenanigans. So hopefully we'll be a lot closer on moving forward with that. I have an urban fantasy that I'm coming into the home stretch of finishing that. And then there is this dark fantasy that I need to go back through and reread one more time and decide what I'm doing with. And that's enough for the moment. I think there's a couple more things in there, but they're all at various stages. My to-do list is large and in charge.
Okay. And finally, Jesse.
I'm working on too much. I have Gravesinger, which is the first of the Tales of the Midnight Sea, which is going to be the first novel-length feature into the universe, which will get its own anthology starting next year. I'm really trying to have that done by October because I want to try and put it in for the ARC Prize from ARC Press. I have Dinosaurs and Drop Troopers coming for my story in Biological Bedlam, which is going to be a antho from Bayonet Books that's all about why you don't do, going back to Martin again, why you don't try and resurrect extinct species. It's going to be all biological experiments. And then there's some other short stories and stuff that are going on. I just like Jana said, I got way too much going on. I'm always too busy, which I guess is better than not being busy at all.
I don't know about that.
And you can find me at outlawauthor.com. That'll get you everywhere else, to X, to Instagram, and everywhere else. My Substack's really cool. Check me out on Substack.
You have to at least include the line, "You spent so long worrying about if you could, you forgot to ask whether you should." That is such an iconic line. Crichton nailed it out of the park with that. Wait, was that in the? I don't remember if that was in Crichton's book or if that was just for the movie.
I don't remember that in the book. It's been 15 years since I read the book, but I don't remember the line in there.
It's become so much
there's
part
a
of
similarity.
pop culture. It's become so much a part of pop culture. It's kind of hard sometimes when you get to that level to know where one starts and the other ends, you know. So you can, this is the part where I remind you, dear listener, to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part, people. It really does make a difference. And if you want to stalk somebody, you can follow us on the internet by going to our link tree at linktr.ee, linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We've got Spotify, we've got Discord, we've got our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. If you want to support the show, because these episodes are not free to produce, you can do so by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, people, and then they'll swim away in a river of Java goodness. And if you want some of that Java goodness, you can go to the web link in the show notes for coffee brand coffee. Use the code PODCASTGRUNTS. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. And you're shopping local because that is an American company where they roast the beans here. This is not a drop shipping operation. Hey, this is a real legit company, people. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy and absentee co-host, dang that Border Patrol making him do jobs and work for his money and stuff, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things go boom. Thank you for coming on, Maggie, Jana, Jesse. And with that, we're going to hit the end button. Don't cuss yet, Jesse.